All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Sheher Bano, and on behalf of Park Launch team, I welcome you all. Before we begin, I would like to thank Ali Fahad, Waqas Rashid, and the rest of the Park Launch team for putting this together. It's a brilliant platform where people from different walks of life have come together to share knowledge and to connect with each other. So thank you, Waqas, thank you, Ali, and the rest of the team. Our topic of the day is a very interesting one. It's mental illness and the stigma that surrounds it. And the speaker that we have with us today is Dr. Aliya Khalid. Dr. Aliya Khalid has done her MBBS from Faber Medical College, after which she did her postgraduate training from the UK. After her postgraduate training, she served there. She worked in various prestigious hospitals in the UK for a good 10 years before returning to Pakistan. For the last 3 years, she has been working here as a consultant psychiatrist in hospitals like Shifa International and Ali Medical Center, and she also does online consultation. So thank you very much, Dr. Aliya, for being with us today. It's a pleasure to have you here. And over to you, Dr. Aliya. So the first question I'm going to throw at you is that, mental health is a vast field. Why did you choose this stigma, this particular topic that we are going to discuss today?
Thank you, Sharbano. Thank you for having me here. Okay, to start off, I'm going to share a story today with all of you. It's a story of a 14-year-old girl who I met in my clinic recently. She came she had depression and she was having suicidal thoughts. When I asked her where her parents were, she said that she had come to see me secretly and that her parents didn't know that she was coming to see me. She further said that she was too afraid to tell her parents that she was struggling and that they did not believe in a mental illness. So I want everyone to just take a pause here and just imagine that this 14-year-old girl standing outside my clinic and just think about how frightened, how lonely, how scared, and how confused she must be. And that's why I chose today to talk about stigma, the very thing that stopped her parents from being beside her on that day outside my clinic. And that's why I think it's very relevant and very important to talk about.
Absolutely, this is alarming. So please help us understand what this word stigma is. Where does it come from?
Well, stigma is a Greek word, and its literal meaning is mark. It used to identify criminals and traitors publicly, so people could keep a distance, or people would know that these are the people to stay away from. If in more modern sense, the way we describe stigma, it has 3 stages. And so if I take you through those stages, stage 1 is that we mark an individual as different. So the first stage of stigmatization is that there is a particular individual and we have marked him as different from the rest of us. The stage 2 is that we as a society develop a set of beliefs about that individual, that they are different and that there is something wrong with them and that we need to stay away from them. And these beliefs may vary, but they're all usually very discriminating. The third stage of stigmatization is that as a society, we develop certain behaviors towards that individual to their detriment.
Right. So this is very alarming. Could you also give us an example that can help us understand all these stages? An example from that we can
Sure,
relate to?
sure. If let's talk about someone who has schizophrenia. Normally, you know, the mindset that people have as soon as they hear this word, they associate it with violence or with very odd or very challenging behavior. So what happens in stage 1 is that rather than saying that this person has schizophrenia or has a mental illness, we say that this person is mad, or this person is mental, or this person is crazy or schizophrenic. So these are the labels we are giving to that individual. In stage 2, what happens is we develop a set of beliefs, often driven by the media, the role the films have played, and you know, generally the way this whole stigmatization works. So we develop those false beliefs about that particular individual, in this case the patient with schizophrenia. And in stage 3, we start behaving in a discriminatory and judgmental manner. And therefore, you know, especially when it comes to someone, if we say has schizophrenia, we would be, you know, we would avoid them, we would be prejudiced towards them, we would socially isolate them, and we would, in some cases, be scared of them. So now you understand how this whole stigmatization works and how the various stages are.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, my next question would be, where does it stem from? When did it all start?
Well, if we talk about stigma in general, it is not, you know, it's not specific to mental illness only. If you go back, we have seen in the past that infectious diseases like, you know, illnesses like leprosy, plague, tuberculosis, HIV, you know, they were all stigmatized. And in current times, we have all witnessed and we have all seen how COVID infection has been stigmatized, how people who developed the infection, who were looking after them, and even the healthcare workers, how they face stigma at every level. So it's, you know, by giving these examples, I think it's easier for people who are listening to understand what stigma is in general. But when we talk about stigma and mental health, it is, you know, it has very deep roots and a long history. So if you bear with me, and I'm going to just describe very briefly some of the historical background where stigma stems from. अगर हम 17th century को read करें या उसके बारे में पढ़ें, या हम medieval Europe के बारे में पढ़ते हैं, तो around that time, people who had mental illnesses, often their mental illnesses were attributed to, you know, witchcraft, magic, being possessed by a demon, or them being sinful. So there were all these notions, and often those poor people were brutally killed. They were sometimes burnt alive. They were sometimes drowned. So there were very, very brutal punishments given to these people. And you can imagine कि इस सारी ये जो attitude था लोगों का towards these people, what fear it must have created in general public. And therefore, it's like when I say that the stigma starting around that time, it has such deep roots that to this day, we are fighting that fear and that same kind of attitude that people have towards mental illnesses.
Yeah. So, you know, my next question would be that although I agree with you that the stigma to this day exists, but we also see that there is a lot of activity going on around mental health awareness. People are more aware generally, and people are more tolerant towards it. Don't you agree? So I would like to ask, you know, just help me understand the evolution of the word stigma. Years or decades or centuries, how the journey has been?
The journey has been up and down. And we are still a long way from where we should be. But yes, by the beginning of 20th century, things started to evolve, and when with Freud's description of unconscious mind and how he described that it plays a role in development of mental disorder, अराउंड दैट टाइम लोगों ने समझना और एक्सेप्ट करना शुरू किया कि यस अ मेंटल इलनेस कुड हैव अ फिजिकल कॉज. उस वक्त डिस्कशन स्टार्ट हुई, डिबेट्स हुई, लेकिन फुली इस चीज़ को पीपल डिडंट टेक इट ऑन बोर्ड. दे वर स्टिल वेरी रिलक्टेंट टू कंसिडर अ मेंटल इलनेस to have a pure physical cause. So, that's why the problem continued, and we see that to this date. And on this particular, in this particular area, I must mention the role of the art, literature, and the media and movies have played in continuously negatively reinforcing the stigma around mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that, because every time we see a movie in which there is a serial killer, a rapist, or some other criminal, eventually यही पता चलता है कि उसके कोई mental disorder था, कोई issues थे जिसकी वजह से he ended up doing all those things. So I understand when you say that the media and literature is not doing enough, maybe they're doing the opposite of it. So, but my question still remains that, fine, we have understood what stigma is, and we have understood the history and the background of it. Now, I want you to, help me understand, is stigmatization really a bad deal? And why should we be worried about it?
Sherbano, I think to answer your question, it's important that I take the audience who are listening today through some of the statistics that I have and some slides that I prepared to emphasize why mental health is important and why it's more important to talk about a stigma that surrounds mental health and mental illnesses. So just bear with me for a second. So yes, why are we here today, and why should we take mental health seriously? When we say that 1 in 4 people will be affected in their lifetime, I want everyone to take this figure quite seriously. 1 in 4 doesn't just mean one person. If you think about it, one person is not just an individual. When their mental health is affected, it affects everything around them. It affects their families, it affects their work life, it affects their education, their employment, their social life. And the other thing I want to highlight here is, and which is what I want everyone to think about, that each one of you, whoever is here today and whoever is listening, each one of you will be exposed to a mental illness of some kind, whether it's going to be yourself or a closed loved one, or a colleague or a friend, because if it's 1 in 4, then the chances are that you will be exposed to it. So that's why it's important that we take it seriously. When we say that mental illness is one of the leading cause of disability, depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. And that's why it's so important to just highlight that how common it is. It's as common as 30% in general population. And it's also important to highlight, and that's what I want everyone to focus on, that an untreated depression is associated with many chronic long-term problems. It affects people's physical health. They may develop, because they're not getting the right treatment, so often people start self-medicating. So they can develop comorbid alcohol and substance misuse problems, and then it has impact on relationships, families, education, employment, and productivity. And again, mental illness is the single greatest cause of worker disability worldwide. Imagine that if you don't provide your employee the right help at the right time, if an employee does not get picked up at the right time and is treated, what cost it would be to you? It's about $10,000 per employee per year. So again, let me emphasize that if you prevent someone or from developing a mental illness, or if they have developed a condition, treat it and encourage treatment at the right time. Imagine what you can save.
We're also getting a few questions in the chat box. So once you're done walking us through the slides, I'm going to ask those.
Sure. Okay. This is where I think this is the main problem, which I really want to emphasize here. We have spoken so far, we have talked about what stigma is, its historical background, where it all comes from, and why mental health is important. Now, what I want to highlight is what stigma is doing to us. What it's doing to us is, can you imagine, it causes 8 to 10 years of delay in seeking treatment from the beginning of symptoms until the person get the right kind of help. This is very alarming. Think about it, 8 to 10 long years. So therefore, it's important to be aware that, and then later on, I'm going to be talking about why is it so? Why there is a delay in seeking treatment, why there is a delay in asking for help. Here we are. Okay, I'm going to start off with the fact, and it's something we call self-stigmatization. And over here, I'm going to just briefly mention the survey that we circulated and the results that we got. And surprisingly, in fact, not very surprisingly, majority of the people who did have symptoms, but what they, what stopped them from seeking help was the fact that they thought they could control their symptoms. And that's what I call self-stigmatization. We put barriers and obstacles on ourselves. We stop ourselves from, reaching out to people. We have actually, we tell ourselves often that this is our own weakness, or this is our own laziness, or we can, maybe I'm not being spiritual enough, or maybe I'm not being grateful enough. There are all these different ideas around why people think that they might have developed a mental illness. So once they have overcome that barrier, that self-stigma, the second barrier is that there is a misunderstanding about psychiatric diagnosis. Why? Because, okay, you have fractured your arm, and you go and get an X-ray done, and you go to the orthopedic surgeon, and he looks at the X-ray and he tells you that you have a fracture. Similarly, with many other conditions, you get blood tests done, you get investigations, and you have the evidence there. When it comes to psychiatric illnesses, we don't have any such investigations. We don't have any scans. We don't have any blood tests. So people, they have developed the idea that if we can't see it, it must not be real. And therefore, if it's not real, it's something that we can just snap out of it, or we can just control it, or we don't have to go and see a doctor. Third problem, the myths that people have developed, and the lack of faith that people have about psychiatric treatments. They don't think that they work. A lot of people think that some psychiatric treatments are, or medicines, you start taking medicines, I'll become addicted to them. And most people believe that psychiatric treatments just don't work. Once they have overcome all these barriers that I have highlighted so far, then now they are facing the society. They have the fear of being judged. They have the fear of being discriminated if someone at work found out, if a colleague or a friend or their boss finds out. They have then the fear of people becoming hostile towards them. There is a fear of stereotypes and stigmatizing labels. So you can see there are layers upon layers upon layers of hurdles that people have to face and overcome before they actually reach me.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for giving us this detailed walkthrough of all these topics. I also have a story to tell, and we're getting quite a few questions in the chat box, but let me share my story to, you know, I've had a depressive episode, and there was a time when I was undergoing therapy, and I had to take a pay out of my pocket just because I didn't want my employer to know that I was undergoing this problem or this treatment. So yes, I absolutely understand the stigma exists at all levels, and it also exists within the family, within the your work environment. My next question would be, why do you think employers, why should employers be worried about it? Why should they take measures to help the employees?
It's, it's wherever you are, you have to look after people around you. I'll give you my example. Like, we have 2-3 people. I have staff working for me. It's a small team, but still I have a team. And yes, I am concerned about their mental health as much as I'm concerned about their physical health. If they are physically fit and mentally fit, they are going to give their full potential. So that's what I want every employer to think, that if their employees, if people working for them, their staff are in a stable mental state, so their mental health should be taken as given as much importance as their physical health. तो जाहिर है कि एक अगर जो भी कोई भी टीम को आप लीड कर रहे हो, वो छोटी है या बड़ी है, you have to look after their mental health needs. And I'm going to later on be talking about what are the things that can be done actually to make sure and to ensure that the needs of the employees are met.
Yeah, fine, thank you. There's a question actually. Somebody asked that most of us have high stress jobs, so we are constantly under pressure. So how do we distinguish between stress related problems and deep mental health related issues? When do we identify a low mood or a stressful phase? How do we identify a stressful phase from an illness?
I often, educate my patients and explain it to them that we all have lows, we all go through periods of bad mood, stressful times, and, periods of anxiety. It becomes a problem when it becomes consistent, it's affecting you on a daily basis, and it starts interfering with your functioning. When you think that you cannot function the way you used to function, whether it means your productivity at work, or your ability to socialize with people, or the way you interact at home, your relationships, your education, all these areas have to be kept in mind. So if you think that you're not coping and people around you are telling you that you're not being your usual self, and that is consistent, it's not a phase that has come and gone, it's not a few days and you have overcome it. If it's consistent, it's been there for some time, and like I said, and I'm repeating myself, if you are not being able to cope with your day-to-day living, that's when you need to realize that It's not just sadness, or it's not just usual stress of work. It's more than that, and you need
Yeah,
professional help.
absolutely. So, talking about professional help, Dr. Aliya, I was wondering, we were talking about stigma earlier on. So, I would like to know, and what is, how do you define the role of a psychologist as opposed to a psychiatrist? Because I have experienced that there's a lot of confusion, especially in our country. Who do we go to first, even if we are able to identify we have a problem going on?
If you ask me, I'm going to say you need to come and see me first. But that's going to be a very biased answer. And of course, I don't want to upset all my psychologist colleagues. I think whoever is the right professional with good training and the right approach is the right person. The only difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist is that because we are medical doctors, we don't just provide therapy, we also treat patients with medications, which is what psychologists can't do. Therefore, again, I would say a psychologist, if you go to a psychologist and they feel that the therapy alone isn't working and isn't helping, they will refer you to a psychiatrist. So
Yeah.
make sure
And
that, yeah.
yeah, and I would also like to add that most of the times the psychologist or the therapist, they tend to avoid uh, making that call. So the thing is either the medicine or the therapy. Why can't it be both? And that brings me to the second question, which is, in your experience, because you have worked both in the UK and in Pakistan, so in your experience, what is the one major difference in the psychiatric uh, workplace in both the countries?
There's a huge difference, and that's what I miss the most. It's a lonely practice here. You're by yourself. You're completely by yourself, and you have to do work as a team. You are the team. While in England, we have a team around us. If me as a consultant psychiatrist have a patient and I think that they need a therapy, I would refer that person to a psychologist. If I have someone with, let's say, problems at home and I need to contact their parents, I will involve the social worker. If someone has some problem with their occupational job, I will involve the occupational therapist, and so on. It's a whole team. It's a teamwork. Over here, you are by yourself. So I often see myself, doing everything. I sometimes have to do the work of a do the job of a social worker, and then being a, a teacher. Sometimes I end up educating the whole family, and of course I'm a psychiatrist, and then we are restricted and limited by time, but my my ethics and the kind of environment that I'm trained in, I have to do all those things. So yes, I really miss not having that team around.
I would like to thank you for doing that commendable job and changing all those hats. So my next question would be, what do you think? Where do we go from here? What are the next steps now that we have understood what stigma is and the negative impact it has on the society in general?
Again, I would like to talk about first what can be done and what we can do at an individual level. So we have to, it's a journey, and it's a slow journey. It's a journey of change. And the fact that we are here and the fact that we are having this discussion today, it's encouraging for me. And I think we need to have more and more such discussions, more and more such platforms where this very topic is being discussed. So I always say that start the conversation, start talking about it. Don't shy away from it. Don't turn talking about your mental illnesses or your struggles into a taboo subject. So start the conversation, be open, and if you have learned something, educate people around you, spread a positive image of mental health and how you know uh, just try to spread the positive image. And like we were having this earlier discussion about what the bosses can do for their
Yeah.
employees. I would say that the least they can do is be empathic. If they think that someone is having a problem, they need to have empathy. And that is where you can actually make a start.
Yeah,
So
and
if
that can
I,
also, sorry, yeah, go ahead, please.
yeah, so, that's it really.
Yeah, so that will
Start
take
the,
us to the next point where we expect the employers to be mindful and to be empathetic towards these things and to watch out for these things. Because from my own experience, again, I have another story to tell. In my previous job, my boss once called me in and he said that, Sherbano, are you doing okay? Is everything all right? Because from the past 2, 3 weeks, I've seen your performance has gone down. So that one statement was a game changer for me. So, so I absolutely understand when you say that the employers need to be mindful of their employees' mental health and be considerate. Anything else you want the employers to be careful about or to do in their organizations?
yes, let's talk a little bit about what uh, what can be done at an organization level or from the employer perspective. I think the starting point would be to create a positive and a healthy environment. Give a kind of environment to your employees where they look forward to coming to work. Where there is no harassment at work, no bullying at work, no extra long shifts, where people are allowed to take breaks, where people are allowed to, be open and just an open and a friendly and a healthy environment that will actually the reason why I'm saying that is by doing that you are preventing from a lot of work related stress from developing. So that's the first step. The second area, again, I'm repeating myself, but create a culture in your organization where mental health or talking about mental health is not discouraged. In fact, it's encouraged. Share your stories. If you are in a position of authority and you had an experience in your family, uh, someone you have known, and you've had an experience and it was a good experience or bad experience, share with people. And again, having these small workshops and small training sessions and some kind of continuous discussions around mental health always helps, so the employees feel that it's not something that they need to hide, and they can actually talk about it, and they are in an environment where it's not discouraged, rather it's encouraged. And be the kind of boss that if your employee comes to you and says to you that they want to take time off because they're having panic attacks and they're having or they have seen a psychiatrist and they have been diagnosed with depression, you don't freak out and you say, okay, I understand, it must be a very difficult time for you, and just take some time off. That's the kind of attitude I want people to have, all the employers to have. And that's all. And believe me, it's not a lot to ask.
Right, absolutely. That makes perfect sense to us. We have a question from the audience. They've asked, isn't the definition of mental health also changed significantly over time and through generations as well? Any insight, any idea on how we define mental health today? Is it different from how it was defined in the past? So
Um, can you repeat the question, please?
right. So I think it was one of the early questions where we were discussing the evolution of stigma and also the evolution of mental health. So the audience is asked that the definition of mental health has also changed drastically.
Yes, yes,
Um,
definitely. You know, the culturally, we are now, the way we define mental health now is different from how it used to be defined. So maybe if in the past people were just expected to cope with certain things, now we don't expect people to just cope with everything. People are now, you know, they are encouraged to be more open, and they're encouraged to be more you know, so the actually the fact that the environment was more restricted, so the mental health was also not considered the way it's considered now. It's now, when we describe mental health, the person has to be able to be healthy in so many areas of his life. So it's like I was earlier mentioning, that you should be able to have good physical health. You should be able to have good relationships. You should be good. You should be working. You should be a productive member of the society. You should be socializing. You should be, you know, you should have all these areas where you need to be performing. As the demands on people have increased, they are expected to perform in all these different areas to their maximum potential. So the way we describe mental health today is, you have to, and there is, as you can see, that there is extra demand on us to be more healthy and more performing in so many areas. And therefore, it's become a bigger challenge also to keep ourselves mentally healthy. So now that when we look at the figures of 1 in 4, and why the mental health problems are on the rise, because the perception has changed, and our own perceptions from ourselves have changed. So now we want to be able to be doing more. In order to call ourselves mentally healthy, we want to be doing much more than what were expected from us back then. So people could be happy or could be satisfied with little. Now there is a lot more that you know, that needs to be done.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's a
I
lot of
hope I
pressure.
hope I hope I've answered the question.
Yeah, I hope so too. Right. So, yeah, there's one more area that Dr. Aliya, I would like you to touch upon. And like you mentioned that in, you know, the media, the literature and the art had a certain role to play in stigmatizing or in contributing to the stigma that exists around mental illness. So, you know, building on that statement, I want you to sort of guide us or suggest some ways in which this can be addressed in through culture, through media, through art. So what are the ways they can people can adopt to address this?
Where again, if we start at an individual level, and I keep saying that, and again I keep on emphasizing that the change has to come from within. If we change as individuals, gradually that change will start to happen in every other department, in every other area of the society. That's the problem, that we have to change at bring that change at a small level. I'll give you an example here. When the first AIDS or HIV started coming out, there was a huge stigma around it, because people with the kind of people who were presenting with this infection, and they were stigmatized, and people then don't want to talk about it. Then what started happening? Huge campaigns started, massive campaigns, where massive awareness was, massive awareness campaign started, और लोगों को बताया जाने लगा कि it's an infection, and you know, it's a viral illness, and बिकॉज ऑफ और उस पर क्या हुआ कि फंडिंग की, लोग गवर्नमेंट ने बहुत ज़्यादा फंडिंग की और इसके ऊपर बहुत ज़्यादा पैसा खर्च किया गया ताकि लोगों को, ताकि इस कंडीशन को डिस्टिग्मेटाइज किया जाए. तो gradually we have seen over the years how now people have started accepting. In fact, now hardly there's anyone who talk about it in that stigmatizing fashion. So like I said, कि बहुत you know इस एरिया में बहुत काम करने की ज़रूरत है. इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे, गवर्नमेंट लेवल पे फंडिंग की ज़रूरत है, अवेयरनेस कैंपेन्स की ज़रूरत है. एंड इवेंचुअली द राइटर्स, हमारा जब लोगों का माइंडसेट चेंज होगा ना, अगर हम वो सेंसेशनलाइजिंग मूवीज जिसमें एक विलन है जो कि जिसके कोई मेंटल इलनेस है, हम उसको क्रिटिसाइज करेंगे और हम उसको उस जो राइटर होगा, जो प्रोड्यूसर होगा, उसको एक बैकलैश मिलेगा कि what they have done is actually not healthy or not constructive. So next time he's going to make that movie, he's going to think twice about it. So we have to stop this culture of still really giving a huge applause to these people who are to this date making such movies. And similarly, what happens on the media, as every time you hear a mass shooting happening somewhere, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? It's probably someone who is crazy or who has a mental illness has done it. Why don't we challenge these stereotypes? Why we still continue to see it? We need to ask ourselves, and then we'll know the answer. The reason why I say it, Sharbano, is that the stigma is within us. We are not only, we are not only victims of it, but we are also guilty. A lot of us are guilty. We are playing a role in propagating this stigma. So until and unless we change ourselves, this perception and this mindset won't change.
Yeah, absolutely. So even in our day-to-day communication, when we are talking with friends, we use these words very, randomly. We say, "Oh, so and so is crazy," and this woman is OCD, and she's schizophrenic. So this is the entire labeling and this judging the other person. It's a part of our language. It has become a part of our language. We need to be mindful, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that brings me to the next question. Like when you said that we need to be really careful on the individual level and we need to be open, how big a role language plays, like we just discussed?
Language plays a huge role, and I'll give you again, I see so many patients that come to me and they say, and it's sometimes, it used to make me laugh how often it's been asked from me that they want the patient who is genuinely ill, really, really suffering, and they want this reassurance from me, and they say, Dr. Sahab, aap mujhe bas ye bataएं कि मैं पागल तो नहीं हो रहा, क्या मैं पागल हो रहा हूँ? Yeah. So that the word pagal, the way it's used in our society, it's mind-blowing. And लोग इतने डरे हुए होते हैं कि वो उनका ख्याल होता है कि अगर उनको डिप्रेशन हो गया है तो they've gone crazy, or people are going to call them mental, and then I sit and for 5-10 years explain to them that no, this is not how it is, and it's just a condition, and we'll treat it and they'll get better. So labels, we were talking about these labels, and it's really very, very important not to use these stigmatizing labels. It's very demoralizing, it's very upsetting, and it's very discouraging for people, and it is actually stopping them from coming and asking for help. They are actually very, very worried about being given these labels. And these labels are also happening within families, unfortunately. uh, within families, close relatives are putting these labels on each other. So we really have to be very careful and mindful of it. It's not a joke. You may be laughing about it, but it could be a very sensitive area for someone else.
Yeah. So we have another question here. How can we distinguish between being in depression or mentally ill? I'm not sure what that exactly means, but could you just maybe just help us understand how do we identify if someone is going into depression and it's not just a low mood? I think we have touched upon this in the beginning, but maybe you can go over it again.
I think what they're asking is, let me explain. Mental illnesses are, of many types, and depression is just one of them. So schizophrenia is a mental illness, bipolar affective disorder is a mental illness, uh, other anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, eating disorder, they're all types of mental illnesses. Depression is one of them. So let's just make that clear, that depression is one of the different mental illnesses that we are talking about here. It is a mental illness, one of them. And now coming to your question, like I said, depression is different from sad mood and occasional sadness or low mood. It's a whole set of symptoms where we say that. Let's talk about some of the symptoms. People will have low mood. People will have low energy. They will lose interest in things that they used to enjoy. There is a loss of enjoyment. There is a loss of pleasure. There is a loss of focus, and the list goes on. So this is a set of symptoms that contribute to the diagnosis of depression. So depression is not just low mood. Low mood is one of the symptoms of depression. Or sadness is one of the symptoms of depression.
Right. So two more points. One is that, I have noticed and I've experienced that people normally relate depression specifically to, not being grateful enough, being away from religion, not being regular at namaz. And I've seen people advocating or advising those in depression that you need to be regular at namaz and you'll be fine. Start praying tahajjud and you will be fine. What do you say about it?
This particular mindset or this particular way of thinking is what really makes me, I don't know, I'm just trying to be diplomatic here, but it upsets me. It's very upsetting. The reason why I say it is, again, it's a stigma. It's a kind of stigma where you're not accepting it as a real illness, and you're telling the person that that person is not being grateful enough or not being spiritual enough. And believe me, I have had some religious scholars who are the kind of people who have been in tears, and they actually thought that they were being punished by God because they have done something, they have upset they have upset someone, and now they're being punished for their sins. And when I sat and explained to them that it's a chemical imbalance which is making them feel the way they do, and it has absolutely nothing to do with how spiritual they are or how grateful they are. Yes, it helps. I'm not undermining the fact that being grateful, being spiritual, being positive, and it all helps to keep a healthy state of mind. But that does depression.
Sorry, hello.
Yes,
can you hear me? I think
I
there was
can
a
hear
bit of
you. Yes.
There's a bit of a disturbance. That brings me to the next question, actually. And somebody asked, how do we stay mentally healthy? What do you recommend us? What are the things that we need to be doing in order to protect us from these illnesses?
Uh, I'm going to describe it the way we look at mental illness and the way we try to manage it. So there is what I call a biopsychosocial model to treating or even preventing a condition. So when it comes to biological or a physical side, you need to look after your physical health. You really have to be physically healthy to be mentally healthy. That should be the first step. On the psychological side of things, yes, you have to be aware of, it is when we talk about therapy, it is encouraged that positive thoughts, things that you do and enjoy doing, there should be hobbies, there should be, I often tell my patients that do the things that you enjoy doing. Do the things that help you relax and feel good, and try to look after your mental health by being positive and by engaging in activities that keeps you stay positive. And then the social aspect. So I talked about the physical health, I talked about the psychological or our way of thinking, and then the social aspect. What is social aspect? Look around you and see if there is any source of chronic stress. If your job is giving you stress, are you coping okay, or you think that's too much for you? Is there anyone in your family or around you or in your relationship causing you chronic stress? So look at the social side of things also. The substance misuse, some people are using sometimes alcohol to self-medicate because they are trying to treat their own low mood. So again, if I summarize, it's physical health, it's your psychological or mental health, and then it's the social side of things. But having said that, even if you have looked after all those areas, and even then you feel that you're struggling and you are still having symptoms, it's okay to come and ask for help. Because going back to the point, yes, you can prevent, but sometimes it still happens. So therefore, when you are and you do feel that you've done everything you can, I have patients come to me and say, I look after my physical health, doctor, I'm such a positive person and there is nothing wrong with my family and I am a happily married man. And if I look around, I have no problem whatsoever. Why am I still depressed? And then again, we have to sit and educate that person that it's a physical illness and it can happen to anyone at any time. And therefore, you can take measures to protect your mental health, but you can't always say that you're never going to get it. So if you have the symptoms, it's okay, accept it and ask for help.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aliya. That was brilliant. So before I close this session, because we have gone through the question answers and we have gone through the slides, I hope, I would just like you to give us one key takeaway at the end of the session.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to end and make a link with where I started. So I started by giving you example of that 14-year-old girl who was standing outside my clinic alone without her parents. And now I'm going to ask every one of you, do you want to be one of those parents that your child is afraid of you and afraid of talking to you, and and you have given them that impression that you do not believe in mental illness? Do you want to be an employer that your employee is reluctant to come and tell you that they are having a mental health problem and they take some time off? Do you want to be a spouse that if your, if your wife or if your husband is having issues or is having some mental health problems, you just go and tell them that snap out of it and it's something that you can control and there's nothing wrong with you? Think about it. Do you want to be like that, or you don't want to be that like that? And if the answer is no, you don't want to be like one of them, then start the process of change from today. Start bringing that small change. Even if you have understood or learned one thing from today, start implementing into your life from today. And I think if we have, Shehbanu, achieved that, we have done a great job then.
Absolutely. That's a profound message, Dr. Aliya. Thank you very much. And thank you on behalf of Park Launch team. Thank you everyone who have joined us on this call, on this session today. It was lovely having you. It was lovely having you, Dr. Aliya. And for those of you whose questions have not been answered, the team is going to share Dr. Aliya's contact after the session, and you can reach out to her. You can probably schedule a consultation with her. She gives online consultations as well. And, we can work things out together. Again, a big thank you to everyone who joined, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.